Ladies and gentlemen, true strength isn't found in what we say, but in what we do. And the power lies in moving forward without the need to explain or complain. In a world where voices constantly rise in frustration and explanations flow endlessly, there is a rare kind of strength in choosing a different path. The path of quiet confidence, unwavering resilience, and personal ownership. We often believe that complaining gives us relief, that explaining ourselves gains us approval. But the reality is, both are energy drains. Complaints shift responsibility onto others, and explanations often serve as apologies for who we are. Neither brings power. Neither brings growth. Complaining is often seen as a natural reaction to discomfort, frustration, or challenges. It feels like a release, a way to express dissatisfaction and gain sympathy from those around us. But the truth is, complaining does not change circumstances. It only reinforces our focus on what is wrong rather than what can be done to make things right. When we shift our mindset away from complaining and toward resilience, we take back control over our emotions, our actions, and ultimately, our lives. Emotional resilience is not about pretending that difficulties don't exist. It's about facing them without surrendering to negativity. Every person experiences setbacks, obstacles, and unfair circumstances. The difference between those who rise above them and those who remain stuck is their ability to navigate challenges without letting complaints become their default response. When we complain, we reinforce the idea that we are powerless. We place blame outside of ourselves, whether it's on other people, circumstances, or systems. But powerlessness is a mindset, not a reality. The most successful, fulfilled, and emotionally strong individuals understand that while they may not control every situation, they do control their response to it. Instead of focusing on what is wrong, they shift their focus to what can be done. It's easy to look at a difficult situation and list all the reasons it is unfair. What takes real strength is looking at that same situation and asking, what now? Instead of complaining about a tough job, one can develop new skills, seek better opportunities, or find ways to change their perspective. Instead of complaining about relationships, one can communicate more effectively, set healthier boundaries, or reevaluate the connections they maintain. Instead of complaining about life circumstances, one can take small daily steps toward a better future. This doesn't mean bottling up emotions or ignoring problems. It means processing challenges with a solution-oriented mindset. There is a difference between venting for clarity and complaining for the sake of validation. One leads to action, the other keeps us stuck. Those who practice emotional resilience understand that talking about problems is only useful if it leads to progress. Resilient people also recognize the emotional toll that constant complaining takes, not just on themselves, but on those around them. Negativity spreads quickly. The more we complain, the more we reinforce a narrative of helplessness, both in our own minds and in the minds of those who listen. Over time, this can drain energy, limit potential, and create a habit of seeing the world through a lens of frustration rather than possibility. Choosing resilience over complaints is a daily practice. It requires mindfulness, self-awareness, and a commitment to taking responsibility for one's emotions and actions. It means catching oneself in the moment of frustration and asking, how can I respond differently? It means shifting from blame to empowerment, from reaction to intention. This shift doesn't just build emotional strength, it builds character, leadership, and an unshakable ability to handle whatever life brings. Authenticity is one of the most powerful tools we possess, yet many of us struggle to embrace it fully. We live in a world where people feel the need to constantly explain their choices, justify their actions, and seek validation from others. But when we spend too much time explaining ourselves, we are essentially asking for permission to be who we already are. True confidence comes from standing firm in our decisions without feeling the need to convince others of their worth. When we over-explain, it often stems from self-doubt. We wonder if our choices are good enough, if others will approve, or if we need to soften our stance to be more accepted. This habit starts early in life, shaped by a culture that teaches us to seek validation from authority figures, peers, and society at large. But the most successful and self-assured individuals don't operate this way. They understand that not every action requires an explanation, and not every opinion deserves a response. The need to explain often comes from a fear of judgment. We want others to understand us, to see our perspective, to recognize our intentions. But the truth is, no matter how much we explain, people will interpret our actions through their own lens, shaped by their own experiences, biases, and beliefs. We can spend hours trying to justify a decision, but if someone is determined to misunderstand, no amount of explanation will change that. Instead of exhausting ourselves in an attempt to be understood by everyone, we should focus on being understood by ourselves. Confidence is not about arrogance or refusing to engage with others. It's about knowing that your actions and decisions speak for themselves. When you make choices based on your values, goals, and personal integrity, those who matter will recognize that. Those who demand constant explanations are often looking for reasons to doubt, criticize, or control. By stepping away from the need to explain, you set a boundary that says, I trust myself enough to stand by my choices without needing your approval. There is also freedom in this mindset. When you no longer feel the need to explain yourself at every turn, you create space for deeper focus and more meaningful conversations. Instead of defending your actions, you channel your energy into making those actions count. You stop second guessing every move and instead embrace the path you have chosen with clarity and conviction. This does not mean we never communicate or share our reasoning. It means we do so with purpose, not out of insecurity. It means that when we do explain, it's because it adds value, not because we are seeking approval. The strongest people don't waste time justifying their every move. They let their consistency, integrity, and results do the talking. When we shift away from unnecessary explanations, we gain a powerful sense of self-trust. And when we trust ourselves, we open the door to true confidence, resilience, and a life guided by authenticity rather than approval. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that values loud voices and quick responses, the idea of choosing not to explain or defend oneself can feel counterintuitive. Yet, silence holds a unique kind of strength. It isn't about passivity or avoidance, but about recognizing when words are unnecessary and when actions can speak louder. Many people believe that explaining themselves constantly will earn them understanding or approval. They feel the need to justify their choices, explain their failures, and make sure others see their perspective. But the truth is, Over-explaining often stems from insecurity. It comes from a place of wanting to be accepted, of fearing judgment, and of trying to control how others perceive us. But here's the reality. No matter how much we explain, people will still form their own opinions. Not everyone will understand, and not everyone needs to. The ability to hold silence in moments of doubt, criticism, or uncertainty is a sign of confidence. It communicates self-trust and emotional maturity. When we constantly react, defend, or explain, we give away our power. But when we choose silence strategically, we maintain control over our narrative. Silence is not weakness. It is a conscious decision to engage only in conversations that add value. Think about the most powerful leaders, thinkers, and creators in history. They didn't waste time justifying their every move. They focused on what mattered, creating, building, and leading through action. They understood that explanations are often unnecessary when the work itself is undeniable. They let their actions speak for them. There is also a practical side to silence. When someone criticizes, argues, or misunderstands you, the immediate instinct is to respond, to correct them, to make them see your side. But what happens when you don't? What happens when you let the comment pass? When you don't react with frustration or an eager explanation? Often, the moment diffuses. The person expecting a reaction loses their grip. The power dynamic shifts. This doesn't mean never speaking up. It doesn't mean ignoring important conversations or refusing to explain when clarity is needed. It means choosing when to engage and when to let things go. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. There is wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence is also a tool for personal growth. When we stop filling every space with words, we create room for thought. We learn to sit with discomfort without rushing to resolve it through explanations or complaints. We learn to trust that our value doesn't depend on how well we can convince others. We develop the strength to be misunderstood, knowing that true understanding comes not from explanation, but from consistent action over time. Choosing silence in the right moments is an act of self-preservation. It allows us to conserve energy, maintain emotional balance, and focus on what truly matters. It is a skill, a discipline, and ultimately a quiet but profound form of power. Self-gratitude is one of the most important yet overlooked aspects of personal growth. We live in a world where external approval often dictates our confidence. Social media, workplace dynamics, and even our personal relationships reinforce the idea that we need to explain our choices, justify our actions, and seek reassurance before feeling secure in who we are. But what happens when we stop looking outward for validation and start trusting ourselves instead? When we constantly explain our decisions, we unconsciously give away our power. Every justification we offer sends a message, not just to others, but to ourselves, that our choices are not strong enough to stand on their own. It reinforces doubt, making us question whether we are making the right decisions or whether we need permission to move forward. The truth is, when we believe in what we are doing, when we trust our own judgment, there is no need to explain. Our actions, our work, and our presence speak for themselves. Think about the times when you've felt the urge to explain yourself. Maybe you chose to pursue an unconventional career and people questioned your decision. Maybe you declined an invitation and you felt compelled to justify why. Maybe you set a boundary and the discomfort of others made you feel like you owed them an explanation. But do you? Do you really need to justify every choice you make? Or is it enough that you made it with intention and clarity? The strongest people in the world are not the ones who seek approval. They are the ones who stand firm in their convictions, knowing that their worth is not dependent on how others perceive them. This is not about being dismissive or unwilling to communicate. It is about understanding that your choices are valid because they align with your values, not because someone else approves of them. When we practice self-cognizance, we also invite a new level of emotional freedom. The need for constant explanation can be exhausting. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of overthinking and self-doubt where we constantly question whether we are doing it right in the eyes of others. But the moment we recognize that our decisions are ours alone, that we do not owe the world a reason for being who we are, we unlock a level of confidence that no amount of external validation can match. This does not mean we stop listening to feedback or ignore the perspectives of those we respect. Growth comes from learning, adapting, and evolving. But growth does not come from justifying our every step to those who may never understand our journey. The more we seek approval, the more we give others control over our sense of worth. There is quiet strength in knowing that you are enough, that your choices are enough, and that you do not need permission to be who you are. When we stop explaining and start owning our decisions, we become more authentic, more empowered, and more in tune with the life we are meant to live. Shifting our mindset from complaining to problem solving is one of the most powerful transformations we can make. It's a shift that moves us from feeling powerless to feeling capable, from frustration to action. Complaints often come from a place of discomfort, and while voicing frustrations can feel momentarily relieving, it rarely brings meaningful change. When we complain, we hand over control to external circumstances, people, or systems. But when we choose to focus on solutions, we reclaim that control. Every challenge presents two choices: dwell on the difficulty or seek a way forward. The first choice keeps us stuck, reinforcing the belief that we are at the mercy of our circumstances. The second choice, however, opens up possibilities. It forces us to ask better questions, to think critically, and to take responsibility for our actions. When we stop looking at situations as roadblocks and start seeing them as opportunities for growth, everything changes. This shift is not about ignoring difficulties or pretending problems don't exist. It's about acknowledging them without allowing them to define us. When something goes wrong, complaining keeps us in a cycle of negativity, whereas focusing on solutions moves us towards progress. Instead of saying, "This isn't fair," ask, "What can I do to make it better?" Instead of thinking, ask, "How can I respond differently next time?" These subtle changes in thought patterns create a profound impact on how we navigate life. One of the biggest obstacles to this shift is habit. Many of us are conditioned to complain without realizing it. It's a default reaction to stress, setbacks, and disappointment. But habits can be rewired. When we catch ourselves complaining, we can pause and redirect our energy. Instead of venting about a difficult situation at work, we can consider what part of it is within our control and what steps we can take to improve it. Instead of fixating on what someone else did wrong, we can focus on what we can do to move forward. This approach is not only empowering, but also deeply liberating. It frees us from the weight of external circumstances and reminds us that we have more control than we often believe. It also strengthens our resilience. The more we train ourselves to seek solutions instead of dwelling on problems, the more capable we become in handling challenges. Over time, this mindset shift builds confidence, emotional strength, and the ability to adapt to any situation with clarity and purpose. People who consistently seek solutions stand out. They inspire others with their ability to stay calm in the face of adversity and to turn setbacks into opportunities. They are the ones others look to for leadership, not because they never face difficulties, but because they approach those difficulties with determination rather than defeat. This is the kind of mindset that leads to real success, not just external achievements, but inner strength, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose that goes beyond circumstances. Over-explaining often stems from a deep-seated need for validation. We want people to understand us, to see our intentions clearly, and to accept our choices without question. But the moment we begin justifying ourselves repeatedly, we give away our power. Instead of standing firm in our decisions, we start molding our words and actions to fit the expectations of others. This is where emotional boundaries come in. An emotional boundary is the invisible line that separates what is ours to carry and what belongs to others. It is knowing when to engage and when to step back. It is recognizing that we are not responsible for how others perceive us, only for how we show up in the world. When we over-explain, we blur that boundary. We begin believing that it is our duty to make everyone comfortable with our choices, rather than allowing them to have their own thoughts and opinions. Think about how much time is spent explaining why we made a decision, why we chose one path over another, why we said no, why we set a boundary. In many cases, explanations don't satisfy people. They invite more questions, more challenges, and more expectations. The more we explain, the more we invite scrutiny. And when that scrutiny comes, we often find ourselves explaining even further, hoping to be understood. It becomes a cycle that drains energy and weakens self-trust. Emotional boundaries help us break free from this. When we understand that we are not responsible for making everyone approve of us, we step into a different kind of power. We begin to choose our words intentionally rather than defensively. We learn to say no without adding 10 reasons why. We stop apologizing for things that don't require an apology. We realize that being understood by everyone is not the goal. Being true to ourselves is. Setting emotional boundaries doesn't mean shutting people out or refusing to communicate. It means being selective about when and how we engage. It means asking, am I explaining this because I truly want to share or because I feel obligated to justify myself? If it's the latter, it's a sign to step back. This shift is not easy. It takes practice to resist the urge to over-explain, to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood, and to trust that our actions speak louder than words. But the more we practice, the more we realize that our worth is not dependent on how well we convince others to see things our way. True confidence is quiet. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't seek approval. It stands firm, knowing that not everyone needs an explanation and not every decision needs to be defended. When we embrace this, we protect our energy, strengthen our self-trust, and move through the world with a sense of calm and certainty that no amount of explaining could ever provide. Taking ownership is one of the most powerful shifts a person can make in their life. When we complain, we subtly hand over our power to external factors, people, situations, circumstances beyond our control. It's easy to fall into the habit of blaming others, the system, or even bad luck. But here's the truth. The moment we take full responsibility for our reactions, choices, and mindset, we reclaim control. Ownership doesn't mean that everything is our fault. It doesn't mean ignoring injustice or pretending that hardships don't exist. What it does mean is choosing how we respond to the challenges we face. Instead of focusing on what's unfair, we ask, what can I do with this situation? This shift in thinking moves us from being passive recipients of life's circumstances to active participants in shaping our reality. Consider a person who constantly complains about their job. They might say, my boss is unfair. I never get the recognition I deserve. Or I'm stuck here because I have no other options. These complaints feel valid in the moment, but they reinforce a narrative of powerlessness. The person feels trapped because their focus remains on external problems rather than internal solutions. Now, imagine if they replaced complaints with ownership. Instead of blaming their boss, they ask, how can I communicate my value more effectively? Instead of saying they're stuck, they ask, what skills do I need to develop to open new opportunities? Ownership doesn't necessarily change circumstances overnight, but it changes the way we approach them. Another common example is personal relationships. It's easy to point fingers when conflicts arise. They don't respect me, they never listen, or they make me feel unappreciated. But waiting for someone else to change keeps us in a cycle of frustration. Ownership in relationships means asking, how am I contributing to this dynamic? It means being honest about our expectations, setting boundaries, and recognizing our own patterns of behavior. Taking responsibility for our role in a situation gives us the power to influence outcomes, rather than being controlled by them. This principle extends beyond individuals to entire cultures and organizations. Leaders who take ownership inspire teams that do the same. When a leader stops blaming external forces, market conditions, competitors, or even their employees, and instead asks, what can we do better? They create an environment of accountability. The same applies in families, communities, and even societies. When we move away from complaining and toward responsibility, we foster resilience and innovation. Owning our reactions doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means acknowledging frustrations, but refusing to let them define us. It means recognizing when we've made mistakes and correcting them without shame. It means accepting that while we can't control everything, we can always control how we show up. The question isn't whether life will be unfair. It will be. The real question is, how will we respond? Complaints keep us stuck. Ownership moves us forward. Those who embody the principle of never complaining and never explaining become natural leaders, not because they seek the spotlight, but because they command respect through their actions. True leadership is not about the loudest voice in the room. It's about the quiet consistency of character, the ability to stand firm in one's values without needing validation from the outside world. When a person refuses to indulge in complaints and explanations, they send a powerful message. They are in control of their own emotions, their own decisions, and ultimately, their own life. People who lead by example create ripples of change without needing to convince others with words. They show up, they do the work, and they let the results speak for themselves. They don't waste time blaming circumstances or seeking approval. Instead, they channel their energy into forward movement. This kind of presence is magnetic. It inspires those around them to shift from a reactive mindset to a proactive one. Complaints and explanations often come from insecurity, a desire to be understood, or a need to shift responsibility elsewhere. Leaders who practice this principle reject these tendencies and, in doing so, teach others a better way. In professional settings, this mindset becomes particularly powerful. A person who never complains doesn't get caught up in office politics, negativity, or gossip. They are too focused on their own growth to dwell on what's wrong. When challenges arise, they don't waste time pointing fingers. They look for solutions. This makes them valuable in any team, not because they always have the answers, but because they refuse to be held back by problems. The same applies to explanations. True professionals don't justify every decision they make. They trust their judgment, take responsibility, and move forward without the need for excessive clarification. Over time, this earns them a reputation as someone reliable, confident, and capable of handling pressure. On a personal level, this principle strengthens relationships. Instead of engaging in endless complaints about circumstances or explaining why they reacted a certain way, individuals who embrace this mindset communicate through action. If they make a mistake, they correct it. If they feel misunderstood, they don't over-explain. They let their consistency rebuild trust. This approach removes unnecessary friction from interactions, making relationships healthier and more grounded in mutual respect rather than emotional justifications. Perhaps the most profound impact of this principle is on personal growth. When a person stops complaining, they naturally start focusing on what they can change. They no longer give away their power to external circumstances, recognizing instead that their response is the only thing within their control. This shift in perspective leads to resilience, adaptability, and a deeper sense of purpose. Similarly, when they stop explaining themselves unnecessarily, they develop self-trust. They no longer rely on external validation to feel secure in their choices. This creates an inner stability that is rare and deeply impactful. The world is full of noise, constant justifications, endless grievances, and wasted energy on things outside of our control. But those who choose to lead by example, who refuse to complain or explain, operate on a different level. They move through life with clarity, focus, and an unshakable confidence that sets them apart. When we constantly seek validation from others, we tie our sense of worth to the opinions and reactions of people around us. This dependency can become a significant source of stress and anxiety. We find ourselves explaining our decisions, justifying our actions, and even altering our behavior to fit into someone else's idea of what is acceptable or worthy. Over time, this pattern of seeking external validation can erode our sense of self, leaving us feeling insecure and uncertain. The more we try to explain ourselves, the more we reinforce the idea that our worth is determined by others. By constantly explaining ourselves, we surrender our autonomy and personal power. We become trapped in a cycle of trying to meet external expectations rather than living according to our own values and beliefs. This is where the true cost of explanation comes into play. It is not just a matter of wasting time or energy. It is about giving away our inner strength. Every moment spent trying to justify or explain ourselves is a moment we could have used to move forward, to grow, and to live with greater authenticity. The desire to explain ourselves often stems from a deep-rooted fear of rejection or criticism. We worry that if we do not provide enough justification for our actions or decisions, others will not understand us or, worse, will disapprove of us. However, this fear can limit our potential. It keeps us small, trapped in the need to seek approval, and constantly second-guess our choices. True freedom comes when we stop seeking approval from others and begin to validate ourselves. When we stop explaining, we start to reclaim our power. We take ownership of our decisions, actions, and even our mistakes without needing to seek reassurance from anyone else. This does not mean that we become indifferent to the thoughts or feelings of others. It simply means that we no longer depend on their approval to feel worthy. Imagine how much mental energy we would free up if we stopped trying to explain ourselves to everyone around us. We could focus on the things that truly matter, like our growth, our relationships, and our personal development. We could spend our time doing the work we are passionate about rather than constantly defending or justifying our choices. In fact, when we stop explaining, we allow others to form their own opinions about us based on our actions, not on what we tell them. We begin to trust that our choices are enough and that we don't need to prove ourselves to anyone. This shift from external validation to self-gratulation is a powerful act of self-love and self-respect. It is about trusting in our own judgment and believing that we are enough as we are. It is about stepping into our own authenticity without fear of being misunderstood or rejected. The more we embrace this mindset, the more we align with our true selves and our highest potential. In a world that often encourages us to seek approval, to explain ourselves, and to justify our existence, choosing to no longer explain ourselves is an act of defiance, a declaration that we are worthy as we are, without needing anyone else's permission. True strength is found in action, not in words. Too often we find ourselves caught up in the trap of constantly justifying our actions or explaining our choices to others. We feel that in order to be understood, we must articulate every thought, every reason, and every intention behind our decisions. But this reliance on explanation and verbal validation actually weakens us. It distracts us from our true purpose and dilutes the power of our actions. The real essence of strength lies not in what we say, but in what we do and how we do it. When we focus on actions rather than explanations, we step into a place of clarity and confidence. Think about moments in life when you've had to make tough decisions, whether in your career, relationships, or personal growth, the strongest people are often the ones who move forward without seeking permission or offering lengthy justifications. They know what they want and they pursue it with passion and commitment, regardless of the opinions or understanding of others. And this is not to say that we should disregard communication altogether. There are certainly times when our actions need to be communicated clearly, but these moments are different from the ones where we feel compelled to over-explain ourselves in an effort to be accepted or understood. Over-explaining can often stem from insecurity or fear of judgment. We may feel that if we just provide enough context, others will understand us better. However, in doing so, we are often relinquishing our power. We put ourselves in a position where we feel we must gain approval from others in order to feel validated. And that shifts the focus away from the very thing that matters most, our purpose. When we prioritize action over words, we become more efficient, more decisive, and more authentic. Our actions will do the talking for us. For example, in a professional environment, consider someone who continuously justifies their choices to colleagues and superiors. The more they explain, the more their credibility begins to erode because they're not standing firm in their decisions. On the other hand, someone who acts decisively without needing constant explanation exudes confidence and inspires respect. Their actions speak for themselves, creating a lasting impression of competence and trustworthiness. Living with this mindset also frees us from the anxiety that often accompanies over-explaining. We stop second-guessing ourselves, wondering if we've said the right thing or made the right choice. Instead, we focus on moving forward, on doing the work, on making progress. When we stop seeking external validation, we create space for our inner voice to guide us, for our values and principles to lead the way. In addition, our actions are a reflection of our true intentions and beliefs. Words can sometimes be misinterpreted or misunderstood, but actions, when aligned with our values, leave no room for ambiguity. A person who acts with integrity, who consistently follows through on their commitments, becomes a model of trust and respect. People don't need to ask why they do what they do. They see it in their results, in their consistency, and in the impact they have on the world around them. This shift from words to actions can be incredibly empowering. It allows us to take control of our narrative, to stop seeking validation from others, and to step into our own power. We no longer need to explain ourselves because our actions will speak volumes. In a world where so many are caught up in the noise of constant explanation and justification, those who choose action become the leaders, the trailblazers, the ones who inspire change and move the world forward. So let us embrace the power of action and let our deeds reflect the strength and purpose that words often fail to convey. In conclusion, true strength lies not in complaining or over-explaining, but in embracing the power of action. When we stop seeking validation from others and start trusting ourselves, we step into a place of confidence and clarity. Our actions, rather than our words, become the strongest form of communication, reflecting our true intentions and values. By prioritizing action, we free ourselves from the need for approval, and we begin to lead with purpose and integrity. As we move forward in life, let us remember that the greatest impact we can make comes not from endless explanations, but from the quiet strength of doing.